A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America in Washington. I am Gibbs Dube in Maryland, broadcasting from my home.
And I'm Marvelous Mhlanganyahuye. This Friday, April the 30th, 2021, the last day of April, I'm broadcasting from my home in Washington, D.C. because of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe, as of 29 April 2021, which is yesterday, Zimbabwe had 38,235 confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 35,594 recoveries and 1,567 deaths. This is as of March last year when the pandemic started. And to date, a total of 400,771 people have been vaccinated against COVID-19.
And worldwide, Marvelous, according to Johns Hopkins University, there are over 150 million cases. And out of this number, almost 3.2 million people have succumbed to COVID-19. And when we look at people that have been inoculated for the second time in Zimbabwe, there are roughly about 76,820. So it seems as if, it's a low number compared to people that have been vaccinated for the first time. Yebo hambe zulukandaba linjani lapha likhona endaweni zonke zomhlaba ezitshiyeneyo. Lamhlanje ku-Live Talk sikhangela i-COVID-19, sikhangela lokunye ke okutshiyeneyo. Njalo silomama uMarlene Chiedza Gadzirayi owabanjwa elesifo se-cancer. So zathi ukuthi sikhulume laye sizwe ukuthi uthini ngakhonokho angasitshela khona. Kodwa nxa sikhangeleke okwethulwa ngabezempilakahle kwele Zimbabwe, bathi sokulabantu abedlula 400,000 asebetholakale asebehlatshwe okokuqala amajekiseni okuvimba ukumemetheka kwe-COVID-19. Kwesikusithi asebehlatshwe okwesibili bayi-76,820. Nxa sisikhangela njalo-ke emhlabeni onke jikelele, i-Johns Hopkins University ibika ukuthi sokulabantu abafika phose 150 million asebebanjwe phela COVID-19, kuthi-ke abayi-3.2 million sebabhubha ngenxa yomkhuhlane lo. So siyakwazi ukuthi eZimbabwe sokusedlula inani labantu abafika 1,567 asebabulawa yi-COVID-19. Njalo-ke kukhona okuningi okwenzakalayo. So Marvelous, will be having today Marlene Chiedza Gadzirayi, who was diagnosed with cancer.
Yes, kunavo vachangobva kupinda muchirongwa chedu tinokuchingamidzai nhasi semusi wechishanu kudai April 30 zuva rekupedzisira mumwedzi uno waApril. Apo nhasi tichange tiine gambo tichange tinotarisa zviri kuitika munyika panyaya yedenda rechirwere cheCovid-19. Tichitaura zvakare nevamwe mumwe akatombonge achiuya iko kustudio yedu yestudio 7 muzvare Chiedza Marlene Gadzira takakwanisa kunge tichisangana navo pavanga vari muno muAmerica, asi pavakazodzokera kuZimbabwe vakazowanikwa vachibatwa ivo nedenda recancer. Uyezve vachange vari kutsanangura kuti zvakafamba sei kuti vazoziva kuti vakange vabatwa nedenda irori. Tichange zvakare tichinzwa kubva kuna mumwe mukoti Ingrid Muhambi ari muno muAmerica ari kuNorth Carolina, uko akawanikwawo achibatwa nedenda reCovid-19, akazowanikwa iye achitora nhomba yeCovid-19. Achange ari kutsanangura iye kuti zvakafamba sei kuti azive kuti ane denda irori reCovid-19, uyezve kuti paakatora nhomba idzi dzeCovid-19 dziri muno, ari kuti akatora nhomba 2 dzaakange apiwa kuNorth Carolina kwari ikoko kuti zvakafamba sei. Bazi rezveutano munyika yeZimbabwe vanotaura ivo kuti pane vanhu 38,235 vakabatwa nedenda iri reCovid-19 pari zvino kubva denda iri ratanga muna Machi gore rapfuura. Uyezve pari zvino pane vanhu 35,594 vakabatwa nedenda iri reCovid-19 vakawanikwa ivo vachiri kunda. Kwozouyawo vamwe vakabatwa nedenda reCovid-19 vakawanikwa vachishaya vasvika pa1,567 kubva March gore rapfuura. Pari zvino pane vanhu vabayiwa nhomba idzi dzeCovid-19 munyika yeZimbabwe vanosvika ivo 400,771. Saka ndo zvimwe zvatichange tiri kutarisa, tichitarisawo kuti zvakabuda iko kuno kuAmerica uko takaona mutungamiri weAmerica vaJoe Biden vachitaura ivo kuti pari zvino kubvira vatora matomu mazuva 100 apfuura kana kuti 100 days in office, vawanikwa ivo pane vanhu 200 million vawanikwa ivo vachibaiwa nhomba iyi yecovid-19. Saka ndokutaura kwavanga vari kuitawo, uyezve tichange tiri kungotarisa kuti zvii zvimwe zviri kuitika panguva ino yedenda recovid-19.
Cut off, and I think we are going to be coming back shortly. So continue, Marvelous.
Apo tanga tiri kutaura isu kuti tichange tine zvizhinji zvatichange tiri kutarisa muzuva ranhasi, asi ngatimboendai tinonzwa zviri kutaurwa izvona muzvare Ingrid Muhambi vachitaura ivo pamusoro pekubatwa kwavakaitwa nechirwere checovid-19 vakazowanikwawo vachitora nhomba yecovid-19. So let's go to the video now of a nurse based here in North Carolina in the United States, sharing in Shona about how she contracted COVID-19 and also how she was able to get both doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. We're going to be hearing from her, just recounting to us how she knew.
Makasimba here kune vese indoinzwa Ingrid Muhambi, ndinoshandira muno muAmerica, ndiri registered nurse. Ndida kutsanangura kuti pandakarwara nayo COVID ndairwadziwa musoro, chipfuva, kungorwadziwa muviri wese, zvokuti ndakati ndikapona handisi kuda kufa ndakanzwa kurwara kudaiwo so futi zvakare. Saka ndakaluza test, ndisingakwanisi kudya chikafu, kuti ndisi kuti chikafu chiri kunyatsotesta zvakadii, ndasingakwanisi kufemeredza chikafu zvazvisi kunhuhwirira sezvamanhuhwirira zvofanira kuita. Nanhasi ndichiri kutambura nenyaya yekuti zvinhu hazvisi kunyatsokunhuhwirira kana kunhuhwa, hapana chandinonhuhwidza. Vaccine payakauya handina kurega kuenda, ndakaenda nokuti ndozoti kurwadza kwacho chirwere checovid. Ndakaenda ndikanobayiwa jekiseni rekutanga, ndakapuwa Pfizer vaccine rinopuwa kaviri. Saka ndakaenda pekutanga, the first day muoko wangu ndowega waingorwadza, hapana chimwe chakambonyanya kunetsa stereka. Kechipiri ndikaenda rechitura, na 2 weeks later ndikaenda kudzokera ndikanopuwa vaccine rechi2. Ndakaita kungoita zvokungoita machills muviri, vanangotora paracetamol, vananorarama the next day, hapana zvanga zvatopera ndizvozvo. Nanhasi ndiri kunzwa musha, hapana chimwe chiri kumbondinetsa chanenge chakabva kune covid futi. Saka torai mavaccine kana manzi auya. Tatenda.
Aiwa, apo tanga tiri kunzwa kubva kuna mukoti Ingrid Muhambi anova iye ari kunzvimbo yeNorth Carolina imo muno muAmerica, achikurudzira kuti vanhu kana mawana mukana wekuti muende kunobayiwa nhomba yecovid-19 zvakakosha kuti muende kunobayiwa, nekuti ndio inozoita kuti masoja anorwisa denda iri recovid-19 awanikwe iwo achikwanisa kurwisa denda iri kana munhu achinge abatwa nedenda recovid-19. Aenderera mberi zvakare achitiye vanhu kutsinira kuti vanhu vanofanira kuramba vachiteedzera zviga zviye zvakaturwa neWorld Health Organization, kuti vanhu pfekai mamaski, vanhu itai social distancing, uyezve kana uchihotsira uhotsire iwe uchihotsirira pasiri pamberi pevanhu. Gibbs.
Yes, Marvelous. We also have, somebody who was diagnosed with cancer. And here we're talking about a young Zimbabwean woman who found herself actually battling with a rare form of cancer for somebody of her gender and age. And now she's a champion for her fellow citizens. So she goes in various places. And, whenever somebody says he's got cancer and all those kind of things, she goes there to find out exactly how that person is surviving and, all those kind of things. Her name is Marlene Chiedza Gadzirayi. She's also a sports enthusiast. And these days, she says she's doing all sorts of things, She's engaged in many things. And she was actually feeding elephants one of these days. And, what she's doing is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She's a friend of Studio 7. You remember that she was here in the United States for a fellowship, and she actually had the occasion to visit Studio 7 on occasion. And I had the pleasure of speaking to her when Patson Zamara passed away, because Patson Zamara also had that same kind of cancer. And she said that unfortunately she was not able to really communicate with Patson, although she had sent him messages, to try and find out what kind of cancer he had so that she could also be of help. But she said, sometimes people are a bit personal about how they are suffering or what's going on. But she really shared about her journey and also what she is now doing to perhaps, educate others. And then she also shared about how difficult it was at that time when COVID-19 started for her to be able to go into town to get some of her treatments, which she was still receiving when the COVID-19 pandemic started. So very encouraging young lady. And it would be really, inspiring to hear her story here on Studio 7.
Yes, let's listen to her story. It's very inspiring, and she said a lot of things. And let's just listen to the story and hear exactly what she said.
To be honest, for years I was just self-diagnosing myself until I just was sort of comfortable, not necessarily comfortable, but then I resigned to the fact that, okay, so I suffer from chronic constipation. I need to eat foods that are rich in roughage. I need to up my iron intake. I need to drink a lot of water. So I didn't necessarily go and see a doctor about the issue. And I had a phobia for doctors, in as much as my mom is a nurse. But then growing up also, if there were injections that we were supposed to have, for example, when we were 12, 13 years, when in grade 7 in primary school, I refused to have the injection done at school. And I said, well, my mom is a nurse. She's going to inject me. And so it took her about an hour to actually, get that get that injection. But so that's the person that I was. I did not want to go to hospitals. I did not want to visit doctors. I would just, type in something on the internet, get convinced, and then stay like that. So this was not over a month, Gibbs. It was literally for years. I could say 4, 5, 6 years, and I was going through that. So it was like that until for me it became a normal. So I did not think much about it.
So then, what happened? What really prompted you to visit the hospital or a doctor?
All right. So in 2018 and into 2019, the constipation became worse. The pain was more intense. And so, any normal person has sort of a bathroom routine where every morning maybe somebody, uses the bathroom or every 2 days, and I'm talking about number 2 here. But then in my case, I would go maybe twice a month, and for me that felt normal because I think because of the progression of the illness, everything that was happening for me was just okay, so this is normal, so this is normal. And but then in 2018 into 2019, the pain was too much to the extent that I decided to start taking painkillers, over the counter painkillers. I didn't think much about it, so I started having painkillers. And then in 2019 in July we had a work trip, so we went to Lusaka, Zambia, and I had the worst constipation ever. And to the extent that I had to call my friends who were doctors to ask what I was supposed to do. I could not sleep, I could not sit, and when I would go to the bathroom, nothing was coming out. So I was then given suppositories, for constipation to push stool out. But then when I returned from Zambia, I remember I felt that I was not well. But then I continued taking painkillers on a regular. So it was no longer once a day, but it was now maybe twice, 3 times a day until a week or two before I then decided to go and see a doctor. I was in intense pain. So the young people from church took a trip to Kariba, and I was part of the trip. It was during a game drive that I felt like, no, something is really wrong, because now I could not actually sit properly. I couldn't stand still for more than 10 seconds. It was just too much for me. And everybody knew, because I would just say, guys, I'm in pain. I know this constipation is, it's something else. But then sometimes I would joke about it. And then now the progression of the painkillers, now I was now taking painkillers every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes. So one night, when I was home alone, the pain was too much. I took painkillers, and then the pain didn't go. And I was now I was taking the type of painkillers that would need water to go down. But then because of the way I was taking those painkillers, I didn't need water. I was taking them like candy even. So that night, after 15 minutes, the pain was still there. After another 10 minutes, the pain was still there. And I remember it was at midnight. And so I decided, this is too much. I was bleeding. I would try to go to the bathroom. Nothing was coming out. I could feel that I was constipated. I needed to let stool out, but nothing was coming out. And the next thing is, it was just blood all over. And so because it was midnight and because I was just thinking, no, this is hemorrhoids or piles even, let me just go to the hospital and see if a doctor can examine me. So that's what then happened. I went to a local hospital and they said, please take a seat, we'll serve you in a moment. And I said, you know what, I cannot sit. Even when I drove there, I was now driving with cushions all over me, just, for a bit of comfort, because it was, I don't know how to explain the pain. So at that moment, they then called in a doctor. The doctor looked at me, he did his examination, and, I said, I can't go home because the pain here is too much. Can you just do something so that at least I sleep, and then maybe you guys will do something tomorrow? Because now I realized I did need a doctor. And so he said, it's not practical for you to sleep here now, because this was around 1 a.m. at night. So he then prescribed a very strong painkiller that would help me sleep as well, that I needed from the pharmacy. So I drove around that night alone, by the way, went to the pharmacy, 24-hour drugstore, got the painkillers and went home, and I slept. So before I slept, I then sent my parents a message and I said, this is what happened. The pain is now intense. It's too much. So I just went to see a doctor. So please, I'm going to sleep now. I don't know how long this drug will be. Will have me sleeping, but this is what I did. So I went to the hospital. I'm back home and I'm sleeping. So the next morning, I was woken up by my mother when she was calling me, and she said, it's been long overdue. I know you do not like doctors, you don't like hospitals, but I think it's time for you to at least listen and get a proper diagnosis. So from there, that's when I then went to see a specialist. So it was a night of pain that then led me to actually go and see a doctor.
Now you see this doctor and the doctor says something. What did the doctor tell you?
So when I went to see the doctor, he examined me again. So apparently it was not just constipation. I was not just bleeding. It looked like there was a boil. Okay, that's what the doctor said. There was a boil, I think 2 boils even around my the anal area. And so they burst. And so it was the wound, the area was actually becoming infected and septic. And this is something that I didn't know because I couldn't see it visually. So the doctor says, I can see that, there's an area that's probably getting more infected. And if we are not careful, this will become septic. And he started explaining what happens with septic shock and what happens with such infections. So he needed to do an operation right away. And so I said, you know what, it's okay, please, let's do this. Because by then, the only position that I could be in was lying down on my stomach. I couldn't sit back. So yeah, in that moment, I made the decision, please do the operation, do whatever you have to do, because I can't take this anymore.
Yes, Marvelous. So there you are. So she's talking about her experience with cancer initially and what happened thereafter. So we'll continue with the story in a moment. Kutoke singakutshela ke uZulu ukuthi lapha sikhuluma ntombazana uMarlene Gadzirayi watholakala elomkhuhlane wemvukuzane. So ke limlalele lizwe ukuthi uthini kukhuluma ngakho ukuthi wayejala ukuya kuGoogle ke ufike edinga ebona ukuthi angazinceda yena. Kuthi ukuthi hayi abantu kumele bazincede Marvelous, hatshi ukuthi babe belokhu ukuthi bancedwe ngamadokotela, hatshi ukuthi behambe kubo-Google kumbe ngaphi otherwise bangalimala kunjalo.
Aiwapo tiri kunzwa kubva kuna muzvare Marlene Chiedza Gadzirayi vari kutaura kuti ivo vasati vaenda kuna chiremba vaimboshandisa zvinoitwa nyanya nevechidiki zvokushandisa Google kuti uone kuti chii chiri kukurwadza uyezve kuti zviri kufamba sei. Saka vari kuti asi vakazowanikwa ivo vaakutadza kurara kana kutadza kugara, uyezve pane pakamboenda kuZambia vaenda nebasa, vasvika ikoko vakasvikorwadzikana chaizvo zvakaita kuti pavakadzoka kuZimbabwe vazoti kwete regai ndiende kunoonekwa nachiremba. Asi vari kuti pavakasvika kuna chiremba akavapa iye mapiritsi ekuti vasanyanyonzwa kurwadziwa. Asi vakazodzokera zvakare ndopavakaudzwa kuti vakange vaine mamota maviri akange aputikira, uyezve vaida kutoti vawanikwe ivo vachiitwa operation, vachizowanikwa vachiudzwa zvakare kuti chii changa chiri kuvanetsa panguva iyoyo. Saka ndo nyaya yavari kuenderera mberi vachitaura kuti zvakazofamba sei. Vakati mai vavo ndimukoti, saka ivo vachikura vaitya chaizvo kubayiwa jekiseni, asi panguva iyi mai vavo nekuona mwana nekurwadziwa kwaanga ari kuita vakazoti aiwa tinofanira kuti tichienda kuna chiremba mazvikokota anoongorora nenyaya dzakaidadai sedzakusangana nadzo vanyatsoona kuti chii ukwanise kuwana kuti uwanikwe iwewe uchiwaniwa kurapwa mune zvauri kurwadziwa nazvo izvi kwete kuti ungoti chete paunenge warwadziwa womhanya kuchipatara asi ngatichiendai kuna mazvikokota. Saka ndo nyaya yavari kutaura vachitaura ivo kuti zvakakosha kuti vanhu vavhenekwe kana uchinge usiri kunzwa zvakanaka kwete kuti uende kunoshandisa Google sezvinoitwa nevazhinji.
Yes, marvelous. Let's continue on with your story. Here it comes.
So I spent 7 days in hospital just, recovering from that surgery, while also the tests were being done at the lab. And after I left hospital, my doctor then called me about 3 days later and said, can you come through to my rooms? So, in that moment, I felt like, something was wrong. If everything was okay, I don't think he'd have called me in. This was me. And so he says, let's meet tomorrow. I then called my mom. She was at work. By then, I'd gone back to stay with my parents. I called her, and then she said, okay, we'll go and see the doctor tomorrow. We'll go together. But this was in the afternoon. And you know what? I just got into my car, drove all the way to the doctor's rooms and said, doctor, I'll wait for you to finish your current surgery. Please. I was so anxious and I wanted to know what had come from the lab. And so I waited for about an hour. And after he was done, he then came through and he was holding all these papers. And then he says, yeah, so your test, I got your test results. And so I'm happy to actually say that at least now we know what the problem is. So I'm looking at him and he's saying, I'm happy we know what the problem is. But still, my mind was not settled. So he started, giving me this medical jargon. And I said, doctor, I please just tell me what exactly you're talking about. And then he says, oh, yeah, so I realized that you actually have colorectal cancer. And for me, the word cancer is what I heard. Everything else that he started talking about, whatever else he said, was just a blur. And so it was just cancer in my head. And in that moment, that's when I felt like my whole world had just crashed around me. It was the worst news ever. It was the worst moment of my life, if I can say that. And I was numb, and yet in that moment, inwardly, I froze. But then I realized, the doctor was still talking to me. He's giving me names of different oncologists and says, you know what, because this is cancer, now I know I'm not sending you, for example, to just a gynecologist. This is an oncology issue. So he gave me different names and says, these doctors, I know them well. They're going to take it from there. So the nurses came through and, they were just okay. They were in a good mood. I mean, doctors and medical professionals, they're not people who are quick to panic around stuff because, they've seen it all. But then here I was, I'm the one who's told that I have cancer and I've just driven myself to the doctor. I didn't know what to do. So I got out after finishing with the doctor and I sat in my car and I started crying. I cried for literally an hour or so. Really crying, heavy sighs, I would run out of breath. There was a lump on my throat and I didn't know what to do. So I then called my one of my best friends and I told him, then I said, I've just been diagnosed with cancer and I don't know what to do. And so he says, so have you called your mom? And I said, no, I don't want her to know because I don't want to stress her. But then I didn't understand the gravity of this. And so my friend is like, no, I think you're actually already in panic mode. There's no way you're going to keep a cancer diagnosis away from your parents. I said, no, I'll be fine. Let me handle it alone. Over these last years, remember I was on painkillers, so I can handle this. I don't want them to know. I didn't want them to stress. But then my best friend, he did what he did, called my mother and so that's how my parents got to know. It was my friends who told my parents, and because I just didn't know what to do. So, the first few moments were tough, Gibbs. It was,
Mm-hmm. And then it was the time for you to start treatment from then onwards. Tell us your story.
So when I picked an oncologist, I went to see him. And because after I told my surgeon, the specific oncologist I chosen, he then sent my medical information to him. I went in to see him, and so he started taking me through, what is colorectal cancer, what happens, what exactly is cancer, with the diagrams and stuff. And I was looking, and I said, I just want to know, so at what stage am I? How long do I have to live? And he was quite amused by that, and he said, that's not how we're dealing with cancer these days. Cancer is not always about, you have 3 weeks to live, or you've got 3 months or 6 months to live. Let's walk the journey together. And the first thing he said to me was, I need you to want to live. I'm here so that I journey with you, but your willpower is what I'm going to bank on. Your willpower and God. And he said, the ultimate decision lies with God. But I am here as, someone who's going to be a catalyst towards this. But I need you to walk with me in this journey, because I was a mess. I was a total mess. So he started explaining, like, I see it. And, and one thing that hit me was, no, it says colorectal cancer. Colon cancer is more common in 50-year-old men. And so I was sitting there in his office and I said, no, but doctor, I'm only 33. I'm young. I'm a Black African woman. What is this? And he says, no, don't worry. It's common in others, but then you're probably the minority. And so we then went through the treatment plan, had to go to the radiology center, talking to the radiographers. They came up with a treatment plan where I needed both radiotherapy and chemotherapy, wrote down the list of the medication that I needed. So while all this was happening, my family was like, why don't you go to South Africa? Why don't we go to India? But then my doctor then came through and said, you know what, she's at stage 3B. And, at one point he said, this is basically a polite way to say this cancer is at stage 4, which is a critical stage. So because she can't even sit properly, and the pain that she is in, it would really be unfair for us to just put her on a plane and she goes maybe to South Africa or India, because by then I knew nothing about, the alternative treatments, the hotel stay, which doctor, which hospitals. I had no idea. So I just said, let's do this in Zimbabwe. But what I didn't really know was the cost of treatment, how much it was going to be. So that's how we then sort of started the journey of treatment and getting to understand what radiotherapy was and chemotherapy. I also had to sign a consent form, which I only now understand why I had to sign that, because of the side effects that come also with treatment. So yeah, basically that's how we started the treatment journey.
So now, in terms of treatment, what actually did you go through? Where did you go, and how was it, in terms of treatment?
So in terms of treatment, I needed both radiotherapy and chemotherapy. So with radiotherapy, initially we wanted the option of a public hospital, that's Parenyatwa. So when I went there, unfortunately, one of the machines was not working. The other one was sometimes working. So there was quite a long waiting list. And for any cancer patient, a waiting list or waiting period of even a month or a day sometimes is just too long, a waiting period. And I remember the staff, they told me, they said, sometimes we have a waiting list for people for up to even 6 months. And so my doctor said, you know what, we have to go the private route. So we then opted for the OncoCare option, OncoCare in Harare, in Newlands. And so this is for radiotherapy. So basically radiotherapy, before the radiotherapy started, the radiographers had to know the positioning of where the cancer was, which is in the colorectal area. And so what happened is they put little tattoos, tiny tattoos, black dots. I'd get sort of a small injection, and they put in black ink. So on either side of my hips, just at my groin and at my lower back. So there are 4 different positions. So these little tattoos were to align the powerful rays that would come from the radiotherapy session.
Yeah, marvelous. Uyakhuluma lapha ke untombazana uthi indlela ayeselatshwa ngayo. Khonapho ke uyachasisa ukuthi khonapho eze etshelwe ukuthi selomkhuhlane we-cancer wakhala okunye okumangalisayo. Katshelanga umuntu kwazi kwathi ke unina watshelwa ngabangani. So ke uthi khonokho ke wayesesaba ukuthi batshele, sisabela ukuthi ngoba bazakhala ngakho khonokho. Kodwa ke so uthi hayi phela abantu nxa ukuthi usulento enje kumele utshele abanye abantu, utshele abazali bakho labanye abatshiyeneyo. Njalo lokuthi wayenza i-radiotherapy le-chemotherapy, njalo wabhala le-consent form yokuthi ungaze kwenzakaleni, kungenzakala, kuyaziwa khona ukuthi kuba khona. So kulabanye njalo babesithi kumele aye e-India kumbe ngaphi ngaphi aye kwelatshwa, kodwa yena wathi hayi, ngizahlala khona lapha eZimbabwe ngizama ukuthi ngiyelatshwe. Kodwa ukuthi lapho ahamba khona ekuqaliseni waye-Premature Hospital wathola imitshina ifile, wasegcina esiya okubizwa kuthiwa i-onco care eHarare khona ngale, lapho ake bamenza khona okunengi, i-radiotherapy kuzobuya le-chemotherapy. So kunjalo-ke udaba lwakhe, siyaqhubeka njalo Marvelous.
Aiwapo tiri kunzwa muzvare Chiedza vachitsanangura ivo kuti pavakazowanikwa ivo vachienda kuna chiremba anova specialist wecancer kana kuti chiremba wavo ndiye akazovataura kuti pane zvaanga atesta akaona kuti vakange vaine colon cancer, saka vakati ngavachienda kuna oncologist anova mazvikokota wechirwere checancer. Saka vari kutaura ivo kuti vakazowanikwa vachienda kuna oncologist uyu, asi pavakaudzwa nachiremba wavo kuti vane chirwere checancer, vakati ivo vakange vafunga kuti vachaenda namai vavo, asi vakatadza kurara manheru acho, ndobva vazongoenda vakanoudzwa kuti vane chirwere checancer, asi vakatadza kuti votaurira sei vabereki vavo. Vakazobatsirwawo neshamwari yavo iyo yakazofonera amai vavo vakavataurira kuti aiwa, Chiedza awanikwa iye aine chirwere checancer. Saka vari kuti ivo vachinge vaenda kuna chiremba uya wenyanzvi yecancer, vakange vachifunga kuti saka vowana vachirapirwa kupi, muZimbabwe here kana kuti kunze kwenyika. Vabereki vavo vakambenge vati tovaendesa kuSouth Africa kana kuIndia, asi vakazoona kuti nekurwadziwa kwavanga vari kuita zvanga zviri nani kuti varapirwe muZimbabwe. Saka vati ivo vakatanga vachida kuti vanorapwa kuParirenyatwa, chipatara cheParirenyatwa, asi michina yacho inoita radiology uyezve nechemotherapy nezvimwewo yakanga isiri kushanda. Saka vakazowanikwa ivo vachienda kunorapwa pane imwewo private clinic, uko vari kuti ivo nyaya yemari inodiwa mukurapwa denda iri recancer yakavavhundutsa, yanga yakawanda chaizvo, asi ndofunga vachaenderera mberi vachinyatsokutsanangudza, nekuti tinoona kuti pane zvizhinji zvakaitwa nevanhu pasi rose vanovaziva kubatanidza mari yekuti vabatsirikane nekuwanikwa ivo vachipiwa zvavanga vari kuda kuti vawane zvikwanisiro zvekuti varapwe denda iri recancer. Saka regai tienderere mberi tichinzwa kuti vakazodii, nekuti munhu akange audzwa kuti ane denda iri uyezve akange ari kutotya, nekuti vati dhokta paakavaudza kuti mune cancer, vakavabvunza dhokta kuti saka ndirasarirwa nenguva yakareba sei kuti ndishaye, asi dhokta akati kwete, mazuva ano hazvisiri izvo zvatinoita, tinoshanda newe tichiona kuti tokwanisa kurwisa denda iri sei. Ndobva vazowanikwawo vachiti vakaenda paprivate clinic imomo muHarare.
So radiotherapy for me was Monday to Friday, every Monday to Friday. So the positioning, every time my positioning was very strict. So sometimes it actually take more time being positioned on the radiotherapy table. So where the tattoos were, that's where the rays were supposed to sort of cross each other, because the radiotherapy is more about the rays focusing on the specific area where the cancer is located, where the cancer tumor or tumors were. So that's what radiotherapy was all about. So I'd get in, would register our names, all the cancer patients, sit around, knit. There was always something to knit, or, would just chat with each other. When it was my turn, I'd get in, lie on my back, the radiographers, 3 or 4 of them, making sure that, the rays are specifically at the little tattoos that I had, because they're focusing on one area. So for 15 to 20 minutes, the radiotherapy machine would go around me. So it was directly above me. There's a funny sound, buzzing sound. It would do for a few seconds, and then it goes to the machine goes round to the one side, to my side, focusing on the hip, and then it would go under me, and then come back and go again to the other side. So that was just for 15-20 minutes. So that was the radiotherapy part. During the radiotherapy, within the room, a very cold room, I must say, I didn't feel anything when the machine would go around me every time. It's not a painful process, but in layman's terms, how the doctors explained this to me was radiotherapy is like an extreme sunburn. So only about a week into radiotherapy, I started having blisters all over, because of the radiotherapy effects. And so that's what I had to go through with them. So those blisters had to be looked into. The whole area for radiotherapy to work, it's not supposed to have moisture. So I had to use specific ointments on the wounds, and the ointments they would sting and they were itchy, and these are blisters. And remember, I also had that operation, the surgery that determined through that where the biopsy came from. So even at that wound, right, I'd have the wound, and then through that wound there were blisters that would come through. I wish I could draw a diagram to just show you how terrible it was. So while radiotherapy was going on, I also had to start on chemotherapy. So chemotherapy basically it's injections or through injections or tablets. So this was oral. So chemotherapy would, it would go through the whole body, like what happens with any tablets or any capsules, right? So what happens with chemotherapy? It's also looking at the cancer cells. The basis or the purpose of it is to target cancer cells and kill the cancer cells. But what happens with chemotherapy and why it's so tough on the body is that even the healthy cells are caught in the crossfire, where sometimes healthy cells are equally destroyed as the chemotherapy is trying to attack the cancer cells. So that's what was happening with my treatment.
So as time went on, you were always in and out of hospital, and how long did it take for you to go through all those? You know.
So in terms of radiotherapy, I needed was it 40 days, 40 sessions of radiotherapy. So sometimes to be honest, sometimes I would call my doctor and just say, the pain is too much. I can't get up. I can't go for radiotherapy today. And so within that, maybe if I miss a day, he'd have to, call me, talk to me sternly and counsel me about, how tough cancer treatment was. And sometimes we'd just be on the phone. Sometimes I wanted to give up because chemotherapy as well, it was very tough on me. I lost a lot of weight from a nice 65 kg. I was down to 45 point something kilograms. And sometimes I hated looking at myself in the mirror without my hair. I actually cut off my hair because I was anxious about waking up and seeing chunks of hair falling out. So I didn't want that experience. I cut my hair. So in essence it took 6 months. It was a treatment that spanned around 6 months.
Now, where are you today in terms of treatment?
Yes.
So, what is going on right now in terms of treatment?
Okay, so after I finished radiotherapy in 2020, chemotherapy as well. Chemotherapy I finished a few months later, and so what was happening from there? I have had to go through scans every 3 months. But within those 3 months, I also go for regular checkups with my doctor. They're looking at my iron levels, my blood count, just to check if there is no recurrence of cancer, because there is always a risk after cancer treatment, especially in the first 2 years of remission, for the cancer to come back. So my doctors are keeping a close. After radiotherapy or the side effects of cancer treatment, some of them are long term, some are short term, and some of them are for life. So one of the side effects that I've had to contend with is premature menopause. So because of radiotherapy and the focus of the rays, what do they call them? Those rays. um, it was also, it then affected my ovaries and my reproductive system, meaning that I always joke and say that radiotherapy fried my eggs. So because of that, I've gone through premature menopause. So now because of that, my body has been in some kind of shock because of the side effects of both chemotherapy and radiotherapy.
So sesikho lapho-ke Marvelous ukuthi sizwe ukuthi udaba lwakhe luya ngaphi. Siyamuzwa siluyakhuluma ngokuthi-ke wayesengani ucunteke inwele lokunye okutshiyeneyo ngenxa ye-radiotherapy lakunye khonokho ayekwenziwa. So uthi-ke kwangani kulobuhlungu obuningi kwesinye isikhathi wayengasafisi lokuthi ayizuza i-radiotherapy le-chemotherapy. Kunjalo Marvelous, qhubeka.
Yes, apo tiri kunzwa kubva kuna muzvare Gadzira vachitsanangura ivo kuti kurapwa kwavakaita pari zvino vari kutoona kuti kurapwa uku kunounzawo zvimwewo, nekuti vari kutaura kuti vanga vachinyatsotsanangudza kuti radiotherapy chii, chemotherapy chii, vachiti apo vainge vaenda kunoitwa radiotherapy nechemotherapy vaizowanikwawo vachibuda mapundu nezvimwewo, uyezve mishonga yacho yairwadza chaizvo paipo paunenge waisa mishonga. Saka ndo zvimwe zvavanga vari kutaura vakati ivo vakatomira kuteedza pari zvino, kunyange avo vachisiri vari musikana wechidiki, asi nekurapwa kwavanga vari kuitwa neradiotherapy nezvimwe pari zvino vatopinda mune yatinoti iyo menopause, vaguma nenyaya iyoyo. Saka ndo zvimwe zvavari kutsanangura vachienderera mberi nenhoroondo yeupenyu hwavo tips.
Kube njalo-ke siqhubeke ngodaba lwakhe sizothi luya ngaphi khonapho Marvelous.
So because of that menopause, I started having hot flashes. I think women who are around the ages of 50, 60 would understand what I'm talking about. But my hot flashes occur literally every 30 minutes, day and night. I have sleepless nights. I wake up sweating the whole time. So it was more annoying than anything, because I would be trying to sleep. As I'm trying to sleep, it's like it's a heat that comes, like from the stomach area, your chest, and then it just comes through your face and neck, and you just start feeling really, really, really extremely hot. Not warm, but it's quite extreme. So because of that, and even my eating patterns have also changed. There are foods that I'm now in that I can't take anymore. I'm also now lactose intolerant. So the next process has been hormone replacement therapy, where I take these medications once a day. It's called Premic, I remember, and one of my pharmacists assisted by helping by importing the drug from the UK. So that's what's happening now. So the hormone replacement therapy is trying to get my body back to normal somehow. In as much as now I'm also trying to, sort of rebuild my body, eating clean, eating healthy, exercising even. But then because my hormones are all over the place and I would sweat, sometimes I couldn't eat, sometimes I can't sleep. So that's what the hormone replacement therapy is there to do, just to try and, sort of regulate my body and sort of just make it realize that, yes, it's premature, but then menopause has come. And so, it has to adjust. So basically that's what I'm going through. Painkillers sometimes when I'm in pain, and just normal medication. I've also had to go start antidepressants as well as of January 2021 because I was also now going through a dark phase. And so I sank into depression. So I'm also on antidepressants. So I'm about to celebrate 1 year in remission. And so what the doctors say, you can only say that you're cured of cancer 5 years into remission, because within these 5 years, it's still a red bone. The cancer can just come back.
So now the doctor actually delivered good news that you were in remission, the cancer was in remission. So tell us a bit about that good news at one stage.
So as I was going through treatment, the difference with let's say a painkiller for a headache and chemotherapy is that when you have a headache or when you have a cold, when you take pain tablets or you take medication for a cold. Let's say even throat lozenges, for example. You start, within a few hours, you start feeling better. Your headache starts slowly going away, right? That's the normal. But then with chemotherapy, the medication itself seems to be fighting against both you and your body and the cancer. So there's a war that's going on. I know there's a saying that says, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. I was the grass, because it was my body with cancer and chemotherapy coming through and trying to fight each other. But then I then started losing weight. I didn't have an appetite. I was throwing up. I was vomiting. I couldn't move around. I was losing my hair. And so sometimes I'd ask my doctor, what exactly is happening? Am I not supposed to be feeling better through this treatment? And yet I'm now feeling worse. I felt like I was now even more bedridden than when I was just having pain. But then that's what cancer is. It's because of its positioning, or because of its properties. It's something that is really found deep, let's say, within cells. It's troublesome cells that grow out of hand, because cells are supposed to grow progressively, but then there's just some cells that start growing exponentially, so they affect the whole body. So for us to treat that, it's not just a normal headache, it's not just an injection, it's not a flu shot. So I was feeling worse and worse, and I felt like, this journey is tough for me. What can I do? But I had to go on and on, because I had, friends. I had a lot of support as well. So, I felt like I owed it to everybody who was supporting me. And I also sort of had that fighting spirit in me, and I wanted to win against cancer. So after radiotherapy and chemotherapy were done, I had a very strong prayer, and I said, God, I don't want to go through chemo in ever again. My room literally was felt like a hospital ward. And so it took a lot also for my doctors, my friends, my parents to really convince me to say, you know what, let's fight, and let's fight it, let's fight it once. So as I started healing, I moved back to staying alone, which many people were against, especially my father, saying, no, 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 but you need at least a year or two. But then I'm like that, stubborn, independent also. I said, and so luckily my mother was on my side and said, she needs that kind of rehabilitation. She needs to see if she's able to even cook for herself, because I was now just literally, I felt like a cabbage. I couldn't do much for myself. My brothers were the ones who were cooking for me. But when I was deep in treatment, my mother is the one who would bath me, dress my wounds and everything. So when I moved back, I wanted to start, growing again, start being independent, start, depending on myself again. So that's what I started. That was the first thing. I started exercising as well, just to try and keep myself fit, in as much as my goal is to at least gain a bit more weight, to get to where I was. I started doing that. And then because of that, and because I shared my story on social media, I started getting a lot of messages from different people. People would come through and say, I have a lump. Do you think it's cancer? And I'll say, no, 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 no. You need to go and see a doctor. Don't be like me. And so I became that example. I became a personification. I was not the model patient. I was not the model person. I am one of the people who actually got their cancer diagnosed when it was at a very critical stage. And yet I'm thinking, if I had gone to see a doctor and sought a diagnosis, that cancer would have been caught maybe at stage 1. And so the intensity of this treatment maybe would not have happened. Maybe I would have a chance of having a baby, which I don't have anymore because of the menopause that I'm now going through, coming from the side effects from the treatment. So I started talking to different people, and going to the extent of saying, let me book for you, let me talk to this doctor for you. And sometimes I'd actually just go to my oncologist rooms, sit with patients and start talking and laughing and joking with them. So that's part of my healing, being a catalyst, trying to understand, what are you going through? I am here. I understand what you're going through. Because once sometimes as human beings, if someone has not been in an accident and you're in an accident, you feel like no one understands. You feel like the whole world doesn't understand. I felt that when I was going through cancer, when people would say, no, don't worry, we understand what you're going through. But I was like, no, you don't understand what cancer is. This is painful for my side. So I've then started talking to people. You have cancer, let's talk. And I'm able to joke with you and say, oh, so how many times did you throw up today? I understand. Are you going through diarrhea, or is it the constipation effect? And so people then are free to talk about, some of the stuff. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. Like I've mentioned earlier, I'm there, I'm analyzing sport, I'm analyzing football games, Formula One. I'm trying to just keep myself busy to try and be on the positive side. I didn't mention that I went through depression. I'm still trying to get over it. Yeah, because I felt like at some point I really couldn't mourn myself. And when the reality set in that I'll probably never have a child, I started questioning God and saying, so I fought this cancer only to spend the rest of my life alone, without a child, without a husband. So I started sinking in sadness, and started feeling worthless. But then I had to sit with my doctor, my advisors from church, my friends as well, and try and step out of it and snap out of it. And then I have been trying to just occupy my time and trying to stay positive.
And at one stage, you were actually wrapping your hands on elephants, and when you are going to work, you are always singing or listening to music. How soothing is that?
Yes.
How soothing is that?
So I just started that as a fun thing. So I realized, how do I start my day? So the first thing I do is, obviously, when I wake up, I have a Bible verse that I look at. My faith was shaken, and I'm working on my spirituality. I'm not going to be one of those people who say, God is good. I just felt, the presence of God. I was angry with God. I was furious. And so I feel like I'm trying to get back that relationship, with God, and trying to get back on my spirituality. I have a boxing session for an hour. I got into boxing, and then when I'm driving to work, I have to set my mind. So what have I started doing? I sing karaoke the whole way to work. I'm jovial. So the way I start my day, it affects the rest of my day. The how my day will go mentally. It's something that I didn't necessarily read about, but then self-help books, that's exactly what they talk about. You have to sort of own your mind, or else it will own you. Because if I'm to let my mind do that, it's going to start telling me about the things that I can't do anymore, the cancer, how my body had to fight, how everything had to go on. And then, like you're talking about elephants, that's my totem. I am a Mandlovu. So that was my first time being so close to an elephant. In as much as people around me are looking at this humongous animal, I felt a connection. I felt like, this is my relative. So feeding elephants, it was actually a work trip, and that was really, it felt good. I also held a python. um I understood what cold-blooded meant. I started, sort of stepping out of my fears. I've gone on a zip line as well, something that a normal me pre-cancer would not have done. But then I realized, no, this life has to be lived. So it's soothing. Every time I wake up, I know this is another chance. Because also gives, along the way, there are friends that I talked to, there are people that I made connection with. Some of them died.
That's a story, marvelous. I think she has said what she has said, and at the end of the day, I think she's actually telling people that cancer is one kind of a disease that you can conquer. And nxa
Yes.
sikhangela ke khonapha uyakhuluma ke ngokuningi okwamehlelayo lapha ke uGadzirayi. Okunye kwangikhona sibili ukuthi yena wabona ukuthi ngcono ancede labantu abakhona ngale ke ezibhedlela, ayikhuluma labo. Ngokutsho kwakhe ukhuluma ngokuthi uyi-catalyst yokuthi kulomunye umuntu omfonelayo athi, Gadzirayi, kule qubu lapha emphinjeni ngingathini, i-cancer kumbe kuyini, abesemcebisa ke lokuthi uyazuza amafoni amaningi avele ebantwini lapha marvelous, akhulume labo abantu abacebisa ukuthi kumele kuhambe njani. So lakathesi-ke uthi usesenza lokho kuthiwa i-boxing, so uya-exercise, ushaya i-boxing, lokho eyi-commentator ye-football. Ungabuza nge-Real Madrid and u-Arsenal and other teams, uyakutshela inside out, Dimbare and so forth, Highlanders, all those. She's a football kind of person. And then at the same time uthi wakangena lokho kuthiwa i-depression. So i-depression yangikhona kwakusenziwa umkhuhlane wonalowo, uthi umkhuhlane wasumtshaya sibili uzwe ngani impilo ayisahambi kuhle, kodwa ukuthi wagcina nje ezuza abantu abangamncedisa. So uthi sonke isikhathi ufuna ukuthi abe kulokho kuthiwa i-positive side. So nxa sesiya-ke emsebenzini uhambe ehlabela unengoma zakhe azitshayayo, utshaya umajayivana, utshaya umthugutsi, ushaya le enye music etshiyeneyo. So uyabe ezikhulumela ezihlabelela laye ukuze ukuthi azi-cheer up. Then kuzobuya-ke okunye Marvelous abhekane lakho, uthi wacabanga ukuthi umlimi usemtshile. So she started questioning umlimi ukuthi kambe God, why ungichiya ngedwa? So uthi kade uyazama ukuthi areconcile lo mlimi ukuze into zimhambele kuhle. So uphinde wakhuluma lokuthi wayebamba indlovu, umbone laphana ebamba indlovu. So uthi yena isitemo sakhe ngesakondlovu. So uthi this big animal nxa abantu beyikhangele babona ngani njani njani, kodwa wezwa umoya wakhe ungena endlovini. Okunye njalo-ke uthi abantu kumele balimuke ukuthi kumele benzeni empilweni njengoba impilo iba kanye kuphela Marvelous. Lokuthi wake wabamba inhlathi ipython, wazi ukuthi i-cold blooded thing kuyini ngokuqanda kwaye ukuthi ayibambe khonapho. So kuningi-ke asitshela ngakho khonapho-ke uGadzirayi.
Aiwapo tanga tiri kunzwa muzvare Chiedza vachitaura ivo pamusoro pezvavari kutaura kuti ivo mushure mekunge vaenda vachinorapwa chirwere ichi, mazuva ano vakatoona kutoti aiwa upenyu ndehwekurarama. Saka vakuwanikwa ivo vachienda vachinobatsirawo vamwe vanenge vawanikwa vachinzi vari kufungidzira kuti vane chirwere ichochi kana zvimwewo zvirwere zvekensa. Pari zvino vakatoenda kugame park uko vakanoona nzou yavanotiwo mutupo wavo, vakawanikwawo zvakare vachienda uko kunoita ziplining. Vari kuti ivo zvakavakoshera kuti vararame upenyu hwavo zuva nezuva, uyezve vachifara kana vachienda kubasa vanenge vari kuridza mimhanzi. Uyezve vari kutaura ivo kuti chiri kuita kuti vararame zuva nezuva vachifara ndechekuti vakatombosvika panguva yavaibvunza kuti Mwari, kusei makandiregererawo kuti ndiwanikwe ndiri kubata nechirwere ichi, nekuti pari zvino vari kuti ivo nekurapwa kwavakaita havachakwanisa kuti vakwanise kunge vachiita mwana. Uyezve vanga vachichema vachiti ndakatombowanikwa ndichidzokera kumashure mukuwanikwa muchitendero, asi vari kuti mazuva ano pese pavanomuka vanoverenga vhesi remubhaibheri, uyezve vane vanhu vekukereke kwavo vanouya vachitaurawo navo, uyezve vachibatana navo, vachiwanikawo vachivatsigira mune zvese zvavanenge vari kuita, nyanya pamusoro pekuti vabvunze mibvunzo iwayo yokuti sei vakawanikwa vachibatwa nechirwere ichochi. Saka ndo zvimwe zvavanga vari kutaura ipo pano, vachitaura zvakare kuti zvakakosha kuti vanhu vasafunge kuti vari vega pakurwisa denda iri rekensa. Uyezve vari kuti ivo pari zvino ndo basa ravari kutoita, vanotomboenda kuzvipatara kana kwadhokta wavo vachinotaurawo nevamwe vanenge vawanikwa vachinzi vabatwa nechirwere ichi, nekuti chiri kunyanyovaita kuti vakwanise kushinga ndechekuti vamwewo vanhu vavaiziva vairapwa munguva yavairapwa, vamwe vavo vakatoshaya, asi ivo Mwari akavapa yatingati second lease paupenyu. Saka vari kuti izvi zviri kuita kuti ivo vagowanikwawo vachibata zuva nezuva, vachiri koshesa kuti vawanikwawo ivo vachienderera mberi mukurwisa denda irori rekensa. Vari kuti zvakare chiremba wavo vakavaudza kuti zvinotora nguva yakaita se5 years kuti vazonyatsoziva kuti havachazowanikwa vaine kensa iyi here, asi pari zvino denda iri rakambovasiya. Uyezve vari kuenderera mberi vachinwawo mimwe mishonga inobatsira pakuwedzera yavanga vari kutaura kuti hormone replacement, yavari kutaura iyo kuti ndo zvimwe zvavanga vari kunwa mapiritsi. Mamwe avanowanikwa vachitowanikwa vachitengwa kunze kwenyika nafamasi wavo, vataura mazita acho nezvimwe zvakadaro, asi ndo zvimwe zvavari kuti ivo zvakare vakatotora mutambo weboxing kuti vawanikwe ivo vachisimbisa miri, nekuti vari kuti pari zvino munhu agara achiita zvemitambo, basa ravo nderekutoita nyaya idzi dzemitambo. Saka vanotoenda kunepfenyuro dzakadai sedziri munyika vachienda kunoita basa rekutepfenyura nhau dzemitambo.
Kunjalo-ke Marvelous, sesifike-ke emaphethelweni ohlelo lwethu lwanamhlanje lapha kade silo Marlene Chiedza Gadzirayi yena olomkhuhlane wecancer. So-ke hayi we thank Marlene Chiedza Gadzirayi. She was our scoop today. Let's put it that way. She was a person who actually expressed, her willingness to tell us her story. So signing off from Maryland, this is Gibbs Tube saying good night, Zimbabwe.
We'd also like to thank Ingrid Muhambi, a nurse from North Carolina, a Zimbabwean living here in the United States, for also sharing her story about getting COVID-19 and also taking the COVID-19 vaccine. This is Marvelous Mplanganya in Washington.
Good night.